goes my keyword outline. Hopefully it will see enough. Awesome. Hopefully you can see all my speech from that. So howdy, my name is Romeo Rivera. Today I'll be giving our second speech in COM 203 and I'm really excited, so let's get it started. I've been to prison. Probably not in the way that you expect, but growing up, a lot of my family members have been put into the prison system, and as a result, I've seen them get convicted, serve their sentence, so go to prison, and while they've been in prison, I have actually visited them, and then finally get released from prison and kind of get re-exposed to the real world and kind of acclimating to the new things that they have been away from for so long. As a result, I am quite invested in the system, right? I think it's extremely interesting, and I cannot wait to inform you guys more about it today. So, the prison system is a complicated problem. While some may believe prison should only protect society from the dangers of ex-convicts and reform them in the process, there should be more done to set up ex-convicts for success in the world that they're released into. By recounting some of the key stakeholders' views, responsibilities, and experiences, I hope to demystify the system that prison is and allow you to draw your own conclusions. Some of the key stakeholders I will be covering is correctional officers, parole boards and the process of parole, and ex-convicts. So it makes the most sense to kind of address these stakeholders as they're encountered in the system. So let's start off with correctional officers first. Essentially, correctional officers are just guards who are responsible for overseeing inmates while they're in prison, making sure they serve their sentences safely, they aren't hurting each other, and that they are kind of just able to go throughout their days. So when I was researching into correctional guards, I saw that they have an extremely high turnover rate. So essentially, it's very rare that they stick to their jobs for the first year, and there's so many of them that just quit. And this is according to an article from Cheeseman. And along with this, as time goes on, they're expected to do more with less. So they receive less funding and are expected to watch over more inmates. And as a result, they're kind of just it's stressful, right? And so that leads me to the next finding. From the stress, they develop illnesses. So much so that a high percentage of them develop mental illnesses. And some of these are heart disease, depression, anxiety. And those are serious diseases, right? And this is according to the Stressman article as well. And so the reason why it was very important for me to kind of discuss those is these people are responsible for overwatching these people who are supposed to reform in the system, and they're faced with many obstacles, right? And lastly, I'd like to talk about the training for correctional officers. They are trained in the way that offenders are the enemy, and their job is to ensure that offenders are kept under control and contained. This makes sense, right? But it could also kind of result in and that is according to the Cheeseman article. This makes sense, right? But this could also kind of result in maybe a little bit more stress in the workplace, right? If you're looking at these people that you're with every day as the enemy, you probably aren't going to be very happy to overlook them. So with some of that covered, I like to transition into talking about the parole board and the process of getting parole. So essentially, what is parole? Parole is a kind of a release system for prison, right? Essentially, inmates get interviewed by a parole board. They need in order to qualify for this interview, they have to serve a percentage of their sentence, which is dependent. The percentage is dependent on whatever crime they committed, right? And so from this, they're interviewed. And if they get a 2/3 majority of yes, or it's not necessarily yes or no, it's a approval or denial with stipulations, right? So they can approve the inmate to be released completely, or they can approve an inmate to be released to a halfway house, which is essentially you're kind of still overlooked in a gigantic way, but you definitely have more freedom than you were if you're in prison. Same for denials, right? They could just deny you and say, come back, just not right now. or in like an extreme case, they could deny and say, we don't want to see this person for another 5 years after like an appalling interview as so. Um, that's possible. And so when they're considering whether or not to vote on approve or disapprove, their key consideration is whether or not the inmate will pose a danger to society once they are released. And that's kind of the overarching biggest thing. Of course, there are other parts, which are kind of the seriousness of the offense that they had, um, and letters of support and protest that they received for them, which I thought was extremely interesting, right? These letters of support could be from family members, friends, people that they're going to be with once they get out. And so some of the key, when I was looking into it on the website, which is the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, which is where some of the other info, such as the 2/3 and that, were gotten from, they said that many inmates might receive lots of letters, and that's actually not very useful. They prefer to see letters with some of the support system that ex-convict will have in place, the employment opportunities, the residence that they will be staying with, and the transportation that they will be allowed. And the reasoning behind this is because if they're working and if they're like have more opportunities to just like be good, then they're less likely to commit their crimes, which I thought was very interesting. Um, so now we've talked about the parole board and the process of getting parole. I'd like to talk about probably the biggest key stakeholder in the prison system, which is the inmate. Inmates, many of them look forward to being released from prison, but that is not without obstacles. They face a lot of external and internal obstacles. So some of the external obstacles that they face is jobs, right? In order to be successful in the real world, you kind of need to work to get to pay for your housing, your food, your transportation, all those things, right? But an extremely high percentage of convicts, once they apply to jobs, won't even get their application looked at. And so this was according to the article, Challenges of Prisoner Re-Entry to Society, right? That is a challenge, makes sense. And so that's tough, right? And along with this, 70% of ex-convicts are high school dropouts. And furthermore, 75% of male ex-convicts have a history of substance abuse. Now, of course, they committed these things on their own, but that just adds to the type of things that lead to recidivism, which is a tough word, but essentially it means re-committing a crime and getting put back into prison. So we talked a bit about the external difficulties, but some of the internal difficulties that inmates face is reconnecting to their family, right? They haven't seen their family for 3 to 5 years, and a high percentage of them, according to the Challenges of Prisoner Reentry to Society, have children that they haven't had the chance to see, right? And the only communication they have is written and phone calls, and rarely visits because the prisons are usually extremely far from where their family lives. And the two biggest things that they face is less structure, right? While they're in prison, they have their entire day outlined. Wake up, do X, do Y, do Z, go to sleep. Whenever they're in the real world, wake up, work, what do I do with the rest of my time? And lastly, they have fewer social contacts, right? Being in prison, you're surrounded by more convicts, so you're able to talk to more people. But once you're released into the real world, you aren't really surrounded by that. And along with that, you can't really contact your old friends because your old friends might be kind of connected with what crimes you committed in the past. And so that just might lead to more bad things. So typically, that's a really difficult thing to face. So now that we've covered some of the ex-convict things that their stakeholder views, I'd like to close out the speech. Prison is a difficult thing to understand. And hopefully by talking about some of these stakeholders' views today, I was able to allow you to kind of build up more of your opinion towards the system and towards just how it works and along those things. So I want to thank you for listening to my speech today, and you have a good one.